Hi everybody, I'm Beebs Kelley. Thank you so much for joining me today. We have so many royal updates today. Not too long ago, a story came out that King Charles directly requests that Prince Harry stop leaking things to the press and stop saying things publicly all the time. As we recently discussed, Prince Harry has been speaking to the press and making statements and having interviews and all the rest, publicly discussing his private relationships with his family as well as his experience within the royal family. But the boundary really crossed when Harry discussed private conversations and personal relationships within the royal family as a family. And evidently, the king is sort of tired of it at this point, which is completely understandable. But recently, we had a deep dive examining the relationship between Prince William and Prince Harry, and how a lot of the inflammatory things really began when he met Meghan. Harry had a big shift towards making all these grand and public statements, and then subsequently he's saying a lot about private, personal family matters. And this just got worse and worse over time when he married Meghan and so forth. I'll be sure to link that video for you guys in the description box, as well as up here for you all to go back and watch that if you missed it. It's a really important and interesting video because looking back objectively over the years, all this started with Meghan. Now, this most recent announcement that King Charles has requested directly for Harry and Meghan to stop this nonsense came just before rumors that Harry is contemplating another book. I find this really interesting because it's not typical that much gets leaked from the royal family side of the equation, unless of course it's to correct a false narrative, like for example when Harry tried to whine that he was not offered a place to stay and not able to see his father when he was over in the UK just before he left for Nigeria. The palace later clarified that Harry was offered a place to stay, which would allow him to see the king privately, and Harry turned it down. But initially, Harry tried to spin a different narrative. So the palace is willing to correct blatant lies from Harry and Meghan, but the motivations of this hitting the news may potentially be to support any action going forward if Harry were to continue to leak things. Should Harry decide to write another book or fails to cease his complaint campaign, it would now be clear that it's in direct defiance to a decent, calm request and healthy boundary from the king. For the royal family to spell it out in plain language like this, directly to Harry himself, makes sense. Setting aside the fact that they shouldn't have had to do that in the first place, it is a healthy thing to do and makes things very, very clear to define these boundaries clearly and to announce it to the public. Now, if Harry ignores his father or crosses that boundary, the king may feel less conflicted about taking any sort of action against Harry, like, for example, stripping Harry and Meghan and their children, perhaps, of their titles. The public is now also aware of this boundary, which will only worsen Meghan and Harry's reputation should they not comply this completely normal, reasonable request. Some commentators alleged that this could put the king in a weak position, that if Harry continues to cross that boundary, if King Charles then doesn't dole out any sort of a consequence, he could be viewed as weak, because it is so obvious that Harry would disrespect it. Now, I don't think it'll necessarily pan out that way, though. Since the king did make such a clear request, it is a sign that he's over it. Another interpretation of this is that if Harry does continue to whine in public and leak everything under the sun in a manipulative fashion, if Harry doesn't change his ways, that King Charles is ready to give some sort of a consequence. And as a parent, perhaps this was his sort of last chance, last opportunity to make this request and avoid having to give any sort of a consequence, in hopes that his son would respect the boundary so he doesn't have to do anything about the Harry problem. Now, before we move on to the next bit of news, I'm curious, Do you think Harry will stop now that really the last thing he and Meghan have is their titles for themselves and their children? Do you think this will stop Harry's complaints and public whining? Can he control Meghan's thirst for petty press games? I don't know, but it's obviously a warning. Following Catherine the Princess of Wales's appearance at Trooping the Colour, a flurry of articles came out about the Meg. Why? Because she foolishly, pitifully, had her and Harry's closest friend and supporter, Nacho, post teasers for American Riviera Orchard products just hours before the parade began. And this was seen by everyone as a continuation of Meghan's problematic pattern of trying to elbow in on any royal news or royal occasions in a way that is viewed as competitive, solely done on Meghan's part. Now that it is such a well-established pattern, mainstream media is much more keen to call it out for the first time ever, and commentators are finally being critical of this. Before, it was often excused as a coincidence, and I will link a video that dives deeper on such excuses in the description box for you and at the end of today's video. Many royal watchers stopped seeing this as a coincidence a long time ago. Finally, now, more media and correspondents have caught on to this pattern from Meghan Markle. It's no longer able to be seen as a coincidence by literally anybody. The Meg and Nacho faced massive backlash for this. PR experts echoed what many of us have been saying all along, that she needs a new strategy. This looks petty. It's pathetic. It's desperate. And it's mean-spirited to always, without fail, time any form of content with the royal family's events. It is another manifestation of these toxic traits that have been observed with Meghan Markle for a long time now. Because people who are higher in narcissism or have more toxic tendencies will often do things to try to get attention or disrupt or hurt other people, especially those who they find as their, enemies or targets or frenemies, even if it makes themselves look bad. Because the person in this case, Meghan, is unable to see how bad this makes herself look, it just goes to show how foolish and how self-serving she really views this situation. For example, somebody who's announcing an early pregnancy at somebody else's wedding or launching a new venture when someone else is giving an important speech, for example, it makes that person doing those things look bad. It's her shamelessly doing these things despite it being against what would technically benefit her by making herself look petty. Most normal people in a situation like this would purposefully avoid having any sort of notifications or announcements or anything that the press would possibly be interested in reporting on happening on the same days as literally anything going on with the other party involved. You don't want to look like you're trying to compete with people. There really is no competing with the royal family anyway. Let's be real. But regardless, you would want your image to be one that is gracious and not trying to steal any sort of limelight from anybody. And the Meg just evidently can't grasp how bad this looks. The backlash from this apparently surprised all of them. They'd gotten away without being called out by mainstream media for a long time and apparently just assumed that the public was being unfair. But this time, experts and literally every article was critical of this move. Not one gave an excuse or a pass, so much so that Nacho took the post down. And suddenly, immediately after this, the Sussex PR has become hyper-focused on olive branches and mending fences. Well, their approaches don't tend to have a very long attention span. They shift their PR strategy constantly. So who knows how long this will really last. I have an upcoming video discussing how Harry and Meghan are pushing this reconciliation narrative really, really hard. So be sure you're subscribed so you do not miss that video coming up. The motivations behind it are not what you might think. They're the ones who want to be seen as ready to end the feud. Meghan is desperate to heal the rift. That's the narrative that they're selling. And you might be surprised the reasons behind it. So you don't want to miss that discussion. But regardless, this complete and decisive rejection of their trooping the color stunt seems to have prompted a hard shift from the Sussexes. There's little doubt that these coincidences have been consciously chosen, which make them look so silly and small, but furthermore, the fact that the royal family is so commanding of press attention and public attention, it's really backfired on the Sussexes. Almost no articles acknowledged the jam dog biscuit fiasco in the headlines until the next day. It caught almost no one's attention and proved how irrelevant Harry and Meghan are, and how they truly are not able to compete in a way that they previously had not realized. Like with most moves they make, it's hindered their efforts rather than advanced them. In the meantime, the royal family has been continuing to demonstrate unity and positivity and grace as they are more and more showing their support for one another as they carry out their duties. We continue to wish the King and Princess Catherine continued healing and the best of health going forward. It's set an incredible example for the family like the Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, Zara and Mike Tyndall, and others coming together to support the family. Prince of Wales has clearly enjoyed the support from his family, and he's able to get out and enjoy himself and have fun despite these added stressors that he has been through recently. Pardon the interruption, it is a different day if you couldn't tell. I ended up getting a migraine attack in the middle of filming that video, so I had to stop, and I have come back today to finish, so please excuse the interruption. Anyway, Prince William's outing to Taylor Swift's Eras Tour was wonderful to see for so many reasons. He went with Prince George, Princess Charlotte, Zara and Mike were also there, and according to some sources, they brought their kids too, which is great. They looked like they all had such a fabulous time, and it was just a good thing to see. It was a good sign, that he's continuing to do things that are fun and make sure his kids are having fun. It's all important stuff. But of course, some headlines tried to make it a drama-fueled thing. Things like Taylor has chosen her side. It's so silly and shows what little background the journalists actually got on these people before writing their article, because Taylor has had a friendship of sorts, a connection rather, with William for many years now. And she's also a very smart businesswoman. So even if she didn't have a connection with William, she probably would have been steering clear of Meghan anyway. When she was invited onto the Meg's podcast and declined the invitation, Meg sent her a personal letter, no doubt in that horrible faux calligraphy, to try to persuade her, and even had a rumor circulated that she had been to the Taylor Swift concert, but nobody believes that because there was zero evidence of it, and the Sussexes don't do things like concerts without leaking pictures and leaking shots to the press. So most people don't believe that she actually went to the concert. Taylor clearly recognized very quickly the toxicity emanating from the Meg, potentially Harry too, and wanted nothing to do with her, which is smart in general, but also smart for Taylor's brand. So no, this is not some new statement, alliance, or anything like that, though it did likely sting Meghan, possibly Harry as well. Like I said, even if Taylor didn't know William, she's smart enough to stay away from people like the Meg. Moving on. Travis Kelce, on his podcast with his brother Jason, spoke really kindly of the Waleses. He said that they were impressed with Princess Charlotte, as well as George and William, who was, by their account, super cool. They had wonderful things to say, only good things to say, and seemed really genuine. This stands out for a lot of reasons. We have learned of this outing and this selfie just through a normal social media post, which these days is a pretty normal medium for things like that, as well, of course, as the personal accounts from the Kelce's podcast, but not through a press leak. I cannot help but think that had this been Meghan and Harry, we would have had this photograph leaked to the press before it hit social media. This would have been something that they pushed out through their PR avenues to get it into the news, to try to flex or brag. It wouldn't have been like this, where it was simply a social media post, the same as any other fan might on either side of this. A fan of the royal family getting a picture with them, or a fan of Taylor getting a picture backstage. Either way, It's really normal to post such things to social media. What's not normal is having your sources leak it to the news, and that is without a doubt how Harry and Meghan would have handled such a situation. It indicates just how normal the Waleses were being at the time. They were not trying to make this some big deal, they were just being normal. Some people have drawn rather funny comparisons between how bored Harry looked at the Beyoncé concert to how much fun William clearly was having dancing the night away at Taylor Swift. But another perhaps more objective comparison is that clearly Harry and Meghan were not invited backstage to get a picture with Beyoncé or say hello to her, which just puts into focus how non-existent that friendship is. Perhaps Beyoncé didn't take too kindly to an alleged, supposed text message from her featuring in Netflix that may not have been actually real at all. But moving on. Headlines claim that Prince Harry is confused why Prince William has placed an alleged ban on him, and by proxy the Meg, from ever rejoining the royal family in any way, shape, or form ever. He's also apparently confused why the royals have cut him off when he just wants to support Kate in person. Well, isn't that special? How absurd. This has become so bizarre, his lack of understanding of how he has made other people feel. And this is exactly what usually prompts us to just cut someone out of our lives and just stop talking to them, which is what the royal family has appeared to have done with the Sussexes. Some people call it grey rock, some people will have other words for it, but if the person in question simply cannot understand or fathom what they have done to you at all, and it's very obvious, when that person is so unreasonable and so difficult to communicate with or deal with in any way and in any setting, end up cutting them out or doing limited contact, because it's clear they just simply won't ever hear you. They won't ever listen. They only care about and only hear their own narratives, and that's what Harry and Meghan appear to be doing all these years. Nothing you say or do will ever matter. These people just want to be bent out of shape. And we've all dealt with people like that. You try to talk out some sort of simple misunderstanding with them, and they're just operating on a completely different set of rules and twisted up versions of the events, and they keep reaching back to perceived wrongdoings from years ago, stuff that's not related to whatever issue it is at hand. It's just impossible and pointless to try to work with people like that. It's like a hamster wheel. You'll keep running and you never get anywhere. So you throw your hands up and give up. At this point, it's obvious, not just with staying in contact with them, but with allowing them back into the inner folds of the royal family, they have no choice but to exclude Harry and Meghan, even just due to the one simple, plain fact. Even if you don't believe any of the other drama, if you've never heard any other grain of gossip, even if they both were perfectly kind to each other forever and there were no rifts or feuds or anything, even if everybody was happy with one another and got along great, just the fact that Harry and Meghan commoditize everything and leak information and try to make money off appearances or announcements or events that the royal family is not there to make money and profit from. That is the wrong approach. That is not what they're there to do. So just that fact alone, that Harry and Meghan are trying to commercialize everything and sell all these, details and secrets and information and write books and give interviews all the time that draw back to the royal family, that reason alone warrants cutting Harry and Meghan out of the royal family circles forever. Because you cannot trust that private conversations or valuable, important information, things that are part of security protocol, etc., that keep the family safe or keep the staff having normal working conditions. Harry calling out specific members of staff was probably an HR nightmare for the palace. So those reasons are big enough to keep Harry and Meghan away. And the fact that they don't understand that is absurd, and I find it quite hard to believe. But Harry and Meghan are also clearly very difficult to work with. They make everything a problem. They have to impose special rules on everything. They think they require special security. They won't ever just go with the flow. The royal family members royals, on the other hand, seem to work really well together and clearly have similar values that Meghan and Harry are at odds with. The royals don't talk about each other to the press unless in a positive reply to a question. They don't leak information or anything really to the press at all. They're quite plainly loyal. It's very simple. Every time Harry is doing anything, especially if it's coming to visit the UK or speaking with his family, he tries to make it such a big deal. He needs the special security. It's too terrifying to bring the rest of the family, despite that being so absurd and foolish. He gives interviews the following day. Honestly, Harry's the one who's treating it like an institution rather than a family. The fact that he thinks he should tell the world his conversations or details from his visit with his family prove that he's treating it like an institution, a business that he can profit from and talk about and share with the world rather than a family where that information is private and you wouldn't share. He uses it like an institution for media attention. He doesn't treat them like family members, respecting their privacy at all. Or for example, his whining about security all the time. He's making mountains out of molehills and acting like he requires just as much, if not more, security than all the other wider family members. The siblings of the king don't have as much security as Harry expects to have as the sibling of the heir. It maketh no sense. It really comes down to the fact that people just don't like dealing with or being around people who can't just let things be okay or go with the flow, people who make everything so difficult, because it's just not worth it. People have their own lives, children, families, work, etc. going on, households to run. Things are difficult enough or busy enough. You don't need someone coming in expecting you to make things different for them because they want to make it difficult. No. Handle your own business. Don't make it harder on anybody else. Be an adult about it, Harry. Another weird part to this report is that Prince Harry says he wants to support Princess Catherine in person. What does that even mean? How could Harold support her at all? He's caused a great deal of stress. He's allowed his wife to cause a great deal of stress to this woman for years now, as well as the rest of her family. And he and the Meg are not willing to apologize for what they've done. They're not willing to accept responsibility for it. So Catherine likely doesn't feel safe around Harry. Maybe she never did. She wouldn't feel safe letting him around her children. She wouldn't feel safe letting him around her neighborhood or her husband. She knows it wouldn't be in William's best interest to open that can of worms. And that level of unnecessary stress that Harold would bring wouldn't be good for any of them. And Catherine knows that. So she doesn't need or want his support. I don't think any of them want them anywhere near the working side of things or the personal side of things within the monarchy. What does this even mean, this headline? We're getting a little deeper into this narrative and what it could be signaling in an upcoming video. There's a lot more to it than you'd think, so be sure you're subscribed so you do not miss that upcoming video, deep diving on this whole olive branching that the Sussexes are trying to do. For years, many people have speculated that Prince Harry has had great affection for Princess Catherine. He himself said that she was the sister he never had. Some think he felt deeper than that. But even if not, despite what he's tried to say since he and Meghan started their tantrums, he previously clearly did like her a lot and was very close to her and got along well with her. Reports that seeing her in the news at Trooping the Colour made him highly emotional and upset would make sense in this context. Despite what the Meg tried to make him believe and say, his true feelings cropped up. Evidently, this distance with Catherine in particular has cut him deep. It's too bad that he didn't have the foresight to see or wasn't honest with himself about how much he cared about her before he and the Meg have spent years harassing her and trying to hurt her and her family. Because now he has gone so far that there's no way anybody in their right mind would ever trust Harry and Meghan again. But in the context of Harry's underlying feelings towards Catherine, it makes sense that he would have been really jarred by that and felt really a lot of confusing and conflicting emotions. I wonder how this made the Meg feel. It's no secret that she leans towards jealous type behaviors at times and has been envious of Princess Catherine. We have seen it. So knowing just how upset with alleged worry Harry is over Catherine might be a bit of a testy time in Montecito. Well, Harry and Meghan were at it again, leaking something a bit too early perhaps. Either out of ego or trying to distract from certain stories, the Sussexes leaked that Prince Harry was set to receive a Pat Tillman Award at the ESPYs 2024 ceremony in connection to the Invictus Games. Also, side note, Serena Williams is a host for this ceremony, which may have helped Harry's case here in getting the nomination for this award. Now, a lot of people are upset that Harry is receiving another kind of redundant, weird award that he doesn't seem to deserve. And petitions have been started. I don't think a petition's going to change anything at this point. The organization has already confirmed that they are honoring Harold alongside 2 others with their additional awards. And at this point, the awards ceremony is like less than 2 weeks away now. They would already have those awards being engraved and things like that. But I do get why people are upset. Many people believe that somebody from the Wounded Warriors organization would be a more worthy recipient, and that it would make more sense to honor them at this ceremony as they are the American version of Invictus Games and the original. If you don't know, Harry got the idea for Invictus from the Warrior Games. So Harry used the Warrior Games as the template for Invictus Games. It is the exact same thing. He did copy it. Now, I don't have any problem with that copying because it's a worthy organization and it should be spread around. It should be replicated. It should be shared. But some people feel that Harry hasn't given enough credit to the Warrior Games for inspiring Invictus and basically laying the groundwork and foundations for Invictus. Furthermore, because it's an American organization and the ESPYs are technically an American-based award ceremony, a lot of people felt that it would have been more appropriate for the Tillman Award in particular to go to a Warrior Games affiliated person or, staff or teams or something like that. What do you think? I think in this scenario, there's a couple of things that Harry could do from a PR's perspective to soften the critics. He could technically try to spin this into a positive, but right now he's just getting a lot of grief for accepting another award he seems not deserving of. Firstly, he should learn from his past mistakes and not try his bad banter. He's not good at it. His charisma's gone now. People don't like him. He's voted most disliked celebrity 2 years in a row. He should not try to banter with people. It doesn't come off well when you're disliked. And second, he could acknowledge the Warrior Games and give them some credit for that idea because he is going to be in front of a predominantly American audience. So if he were to acknowledge that, that might help him get a little bit better PR for this. If he doesn't, then people might be wondering why the heck Harry has been involved or honored at the ESPYs at all. But a Hail Mary he could really try to pull to get better PR and just maybe do something good would be to have Invictus elect a few ambassadors who are participants, athletes, vets, etc. from a variety of countries, and those ambassadors could accept the award on behalf of Invictus, the organization, not Harry the person. Instead, he is keeping the spotlight firmly on himself. He is accepting the award for himself, Prince Harry, for him, not accepting it on behalf of Invictus or as a representative for Invictus. He's not pushing this light out onto Invictus or telling them the Pat Tillman Award, I would like it to go to Invictus. It's really not a great look because he is so disliked. It's not really working just picking up awards for yourself over and over, especially ones where it seems like maybe he bought the award or he knew somebody and convinced them to give him an award, things like that. If he were to push it out onto Invictus, he could still be there in support and acknowledged as, somebody who's an important role in Invictus. But if he were to honor some of these athletes and participants in Invictus and push them up on the stage and lift them up and have some of these athletes be there to accept it, and maybe even he doesn't speak, that would be some good human stuff right there. And we'll probably never see anything like it from Harry or the Meg. Anyway, this guy just keeps digging holes for himself, though. In yet another court case, a judge just recently demanded that Prince Harry explain himself because he deleted and hid hundreds of messages and documents after the fact that he knew those documents and hard drives and messages would need to be handed over as essentially discovery for this case. The information was primarily communications between him and his ghostwriter for Spare. Now, this could or could not be relevant to this particular case. His lawyers are saying it's not relevant to this case, and you're being overzealous by expecting us to provide information and communication that was related to the publishing of a book. That has nothing to do with this case. That's what his lawyers are trying to say. And while that may end up being true, it's not for them to decide, it's for the judge to decide. They still have a right to see it, and Harry knew that when he tried to hide and delete these messages. But what I think is likely the motive for him trying to hide and delete a lot of these messages is his other court case in the US about his visa. If you don't know, Harry has been under fire for potentially getting special treatment and or lying on his visa application to come to the US and live in the US. Because in his book Spare, he admits to lots and lots of drug taking. People want to know whether or not he was honest about that on his visa, if he got special treatment, if he lied. And basically, it's down to either he lied in the book or he lied on his visa. Neither one looked good. And his messages with this ghostwriter might reveal the truth. So perhaps that is why he went to great lengths to delete these things and hide these things, even though it was going to cause problems, in this case, in the UK now. Regardless, there's likely a lot of embarrassing, inflammatory, contradictory claims that would undermine his credibility in either or both cases. But let me know what you think. Thank you so much for joining me for this royal update. I hope you enjoyed today's video and found it somewhat fun or interesting to watch. Please click the like button if you did, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much again, and I hope you have a happy day ahead. I'll see you next time. Bye!